Now you've probably clicked on this video wondering, what do you mean by dead? Has Yuji Itadori died? What if I told you, technically, in a sense, he has?
No way, bro. Boy, ain't no way, bro. Shut the fuck up.
In this video, I am going to explain the entire Jujutsu Kaisen story regarding Yuji Itadori's character. This involves the thematic idea and philosophy of a good death that continues throughout the manga with Yuji's character. Let's not forget, Yuji Itadori has already died once, and as time went on, internally, his soul has now died in a sense. It was crushed by Sukuna, the King of Curses. But that isn't the worst part. The author of Jujutsu Kaisen, Gege Akutami, has confirmed that Yuji Itadori either dies by the end of the manga in the finale or his friends will. So you're probably thinking, why would Gege, the writer of the story, even confirm this?
I'm confused right now, G.
Well, that's where I come in. I'll explain Itadori's entire story regarding death. I don't need to tell you how Yuji Itadori is the main character of Jujutsu Kaisen, or rather, the origin of a complex tale about Jujutsu and sorcerers. You see, you may not have realized it by now, but Gege is writing Yuji as the embodiment of how painful and depressing the lives of Jujutsu sorcerers can be, whilst these sorcerers put everything in their lives on the line by doing the job. Itadori is an amalgamation of the circumstances that surround him. He goes from just being a bit of an extraordinary boy to a Jujutsu sorcerer burdened with the task of sharing a body with the most dangerous curse of all time, Sukuna, and this was all in a blink of an eye. By the time you watch this video completely, you will understand that this wasn't a case of being at the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, who the hell would eat a disgusting 1,000-year-old finger? Like, god damn. Look at it. Well, I can answer that question, proving that Itadori's life was planned for Sukuna. His life is not based on impulsive choices as it seems initially. A mere idea for a harmless club activity was the beginning of a plan being set into motion that was constructed specifically surrounding Yuji Itadori, which solves many mysteries regarding Sukuna, the King of Curses, and his relationship with him. Number 1, why can Yuji control Sukuna? Number 2, why can Sukuna take over his body? Number 3, who are Itadori's parents? And lastly, why is Yuji so naturally powerful? The cold truth is that everything about Yuji's life was plotted, planned, and slyly executed with perfection by the ancient sorcerer named Kenjaku. And that is where Yuji's sad reality begins. He has never made a major choice in his life, but he's simply living the life that was exactly dictated for him. And we already know how important the concept of choices is to Jujutsu sorcerers. Let's begin the story with how Yuji was as a non-Jujutsu sorcerer. Ever since the first chapter, we know that Yuji is not really ordinary at all like other shonen stories. He is in fact quite popular for his superhuman strength and athletic skills, to the point that he earned a nickname like the Tiger of West Junior High. Yuji had earned this name because his feats were nothing short of spectacular back home. Like, this boy can casually beat the world record for shot put against his teacher just to keep his spot on the occult club, and he could casually break the world record for the men's 100-meter sprint. Yuji can finish a 50-meter track within 3 seconds, implying that he can run at speeds of 60 kilometers an hour. The point I'm making is that Yuji was never normal, at least not the way we'd expect him to be. He has always been famous, even if he didn't go out of his way to do something of that sort, except of course following his own code of moral values. We even saw in the flashback of Yuji's classmate Amai in chapter 163 that Yuji single-handedly disposed of a gang of delinquents just because he saw them bullying someone. It is clear that Yuji has strong moral inclinations, something that can be traced to his peculiar upbringing. He was brought up by his grandfather, who is very serious about Yuji lending his strength to always help people. And well, we know how that went though. More on that in a minute. But despite all the bantering with him, Yuji was quite close to his grandpa, even telling Satoru freaking Gojo that he was more like a dad than anything. We can clearly see the stubbornness both of them share, even until the last breath of Itadori's grandpa. Like most shonen protagonists, Yuji has a few knots in the past adhering to his parents, or the lack thereof, but his grandfather tries to resolve them. only to be turned down by Yuji himself. Like, the amount of anguish Yuji could have saved himself as well as us by just listening to what his grandpa was about to reveal about his parents? Like, bruh! Alright, I'm gonna calm down. But seeing his own stubbornness in Yuji, his grandfather gives up on the topic, but leaves a will, or rather a curse, upon him. He wanted Yuji to use his strength to help people because he was a strong kid. He wanted Yuji to be surrounded with people when he dies, unlike himself. These were the final words Grandpa Itadori left with Yuji, and the oath he holds onto for the rest of the series to keep him going. It is also what begins shaping the non-sorcerer Yuji into who we see him as today, because his own resolve stems out of this statement. A major part of this resolve can be attributed to Yuji's experience with the idea of death, something that he mulls over multiple times in the story. His grandfather's passing was Yuji's first experience with death in close proximity and how it can affect a person's life. Until this point, he was just like any other kid who hadn't thought about death, a destiny we all share as humans. But one conclusion Itadori did arrive at was that death held different meanings under different circumstances. When his friends at the occult club accidentally messed with Sukuna's finger and ended up at death's door, Yuji sensed death outside the school. However, this feeling of death was full of dread because of his coming into contact with overwhelming curse energy, unlike the death Yuji had felt when his grandfather passed on. With his grandfather, it was peaceful and serene, whilst with his friends, it was something they didn't just deserve yet. It wasn't only because of evil energy, but he somehow felt that the death looming on their friends was improper. So coming to know about the existence of curses and their effects from Megami, it didn't feel real for Yuji until he felt the same pressure coming from the school, making him come to grips with the truth behind curses. This experience set into stone what matters the most to Yuji, protecting people so they die proper deaths. Yuji wants people to die like his grandfather, by old age and not in unnatural ways because of the cursed spirits. And this realization is why Yuji risked his life to save his occult club members and even ingested Sukuna's finger. However, his grandfather's last words seem like a curse to Yuji because nothing as a Jujutsu sorcerer is quite simple. In fact, these words were more significant now when we look back to them in hindsight. To understand why, we have to continue revisiting the incident with Yuji's friends. Looking back, it makes sense why Megami's mission to retrieve Sukuna's finger went wrong in the first place. Yuji felt the desperate urge to help his friend, and we know that eventually this endeavor ended up with Yuji eating Sukuna's finger, believing it was necessary to defeat the curse because Megami had taken heavy damage. This was totally out of Megami's expectations. Hell, he wasn't even the man for this job, but Satoru Gojo was. However, the ultimate truth is that it was all according to Kenjaku's complicated plan to make Yuji the vessel for Sukuna. What seemed like an unscripted action, it was revealed to have a much bigger consequence. Itadori's body became the home for the most sinister cursed spirit, Sukuna, and as Megami put it, this occurrence has a 1 in a million chance. Crazy as it sounds, as Sukuna's vessel, Yuji can keep Sukuna's power contained, confining him to his innate domain within him, keeping him from using Yuji's body. This is not actually a natural phenomenon. Even Sukuna was completely shocked that Yuji has so much control over his body with him in there. This making Yuji's body not only strong enough to house Sukuna's soul, but Yuji's own soul is strong enough to bind Sukuna. This makes him and Sukuna now perfectly intertwined, with the two now sharing a space together. But understandably enough to the point that the archaic Jujutsu sorcerers ordered Yuji's execution that even Satoru freaking Gojo couldn't get rid of, even at Megami's request. At first, Yuji didn't understand why his execution was necessary, but when Gojo provided him with the two bleak choices of either dying immediately or dying after serving a purpose, Yuji got to thinking again. And of course, he decided that he knows how he will die, just like his grandpa had willed him to die, with people around him, with death as his destiny either way. The last words from Yuji's grandfather became the compass for him. How can he, as Sukuna's vessel, be someone that leads people to a proper death? Accepting the role meant that Yuji must hunt down and devour Sukuna's fingers. And to do this, he must become well acquainted with death at its worst, both physically, emotionally, and morally. So whilst Yuji turning into a vessel was planned, the curse he received from his grandfather turned into a purpose for him that he could measure his actions on. However, this reason simply wasn't enough to fortify Yuji's mind to deal with what was to come. Principal Yaga brought this up to Yuji, informing him that all Jujutsu sorcerers die with regret and must look at death in the face whilst tearing apart the flesh of a curse. He can't rely on something like the last request from his grandpa, raising a very valid question if Yuji would ultimately blame his grandfather and his last words when he gets killed by a cursed spirit. Now look, even if these words seemed cruel and cold at that moment, Yuji very quickly realized that they were anything but that. He had to decide on his purpose of life for himself, something that only he, Yuji Itadori, could do, because living on someone else's last request can be done by literally any other person, right? However, Yuji understood that only he could consume Sukuna's fingers and keep more people from getting hurt, and hence also achieve his desire for people to have a proper death. He couldn't sit back knowing he could possibly be helping people, saying he doesn't know how he'll feel when he dies, but he won't regret how he lives. Upon declaring that he is ready to see the truth of the Jujutsu world, Yuji learns the hard way that the jobs of Jujutsu sorcerers are filled with regret. Look man, saying and actually realizing are two different things after all, and hence it does take Yuji some time to deeply understand what it means to fight cursed spirits, and that understanding comes from Mahito, Yuji's mortal enemy. Mahito's role in Yuji's misery as a sorcerer was to be a catalyst to both Yuji's pain and Kenjaku's plan. He was the perfect character foil for Yuji, questioning every choice and philosophical action of his. They both were also each other's paths to self-discovery and growth. As the humanoid curse born from the hatred humans have for each other, Mahito is what Jogo described as a mirror to humans, because death is a mirror for humans itself. This is a layered and accurate description for Mahito because his whole existence was based on killing humans, which directly contrasts with Yuji, who had made his goal to give people a proper death, thus preserving life from cursed spirits. This contradiction of character purpose makes Yuji and Mahito despise each other, and rightfully so. But Yuji's empathy turns into a fatal weakness as Mahito constantly tries to make Yuji a hopeless shell through his repulsive actions, starting with Junpei's cruel death. Junpei was an unfortunate kid who had to bear the brunt of being righteous, often leading to scum people pushing him into a corner. He got drawn to Mahito because he had the power to simply eliminate something or someone that he deemed unlikable. In such a predicament, Yuji jumped in to save him from falling in too deep, and they both bonded over their love for American movies. Junpei felt belonged and saw hope in his friendship with Yuji Itadori. The natural connection that Yuji felt with Junpei was perfect for Mahito to twist because of his naivety. Mahito's elaborate plan was all to push Junpei off the edge and make him use his curse technique to kill people. After much persuasion in their fight, Yuji was able to reach an emotional understanding with Junpei, but Mahito was waiting for this very moment to present his final act. He trapped Yuji and revealed his hatred for Junpei and all humans alike, eventually transfiguring him. You know how hard that goes to say, guys at home? Eventually transfiguring him. Oh, you know how hard that is. And the purpose of manipulating Junpei until his death was to make Yuji plead to Sukuna for help, breaking down down his mental state to make a binding vow. This might have happened too if Sukuna didn't already have one with him, but this incident made one thing clear. Sukuna absolutely despised humans, and he wouldn't have helped Yuji in saving Junpei in any case. The kind of life Sukuna led clearly tells us that if he has a choice, he would always unconditionally choose a cursed spirit or chaos over humanity. So really, it was all up to Yuji to realize what he was dealing with from the get-go. Both Mahito and Sukuna laughing at him in unison made him realize that he was up against cursed spirits that embodied evil in its truest form. This was the first time Yuji had seen the true nature of curses, and it brought out the worst in him. It manifested a subtle change as Yuji stated that he was going to kill Mahito instead of exorcising him, which was all the difference between a human and a curse.
Now, as Adil mentioned, all of this was the beginning of Mahito trying to challenge and break Yuji's mental state. After fighting Yuji for the first time, Mahito discovers his drive to kill Yuji's soul as many times as he can. A simple way of saying that he wants to break down Yuji's very purpose of existing, succumbing him to despair. It isn't until the Shibuya incident that he gets this chance, starting with the tragic coincidence of killing Nanami as soon as Yuji came into view. Yuji wakes up out of Sukuna being in control due to being fed 10 fingers after losing to Choso, and is hit with the memories of Sukuna killing hundreds of people with his domain expansion whilst actually seeing the destruction. This makes Yuji cry in despair for a moment until he decides to fight, unknowingly running into Mahito, killing Nanami. Mahito's perfect planning leads to his final confrontation with Yuji, with Nanami cursing Yuji by saying, "You've got it from here." This is the second curse put on Yuji from someone important to him, making him feel the weight of becoming a Jujutsu sorcerer. Before they begin their fight, Mahito tells Yuji that he will never defeat him until he realizes that they are the same, an idea that Yuji had refuted since their first meeting. "You are me" is also what Mahito said as he transfigured Junpei's soul in front of Yuji's eyes. Throughout the fight, Mahito used transfigured humans to prick Yuji's humanity. Mahito had decided to slowly show Yuji hell by playing with the humans' lives around him. And this plan worked because Mahito very well knew and understood Yuji's drive to constantly save people and give them proper deaths. He also understood that Yuji was hung up on wanting to keep people safe but never understood what it meant to fight curses. The only ignorant one here was Yuji because he didn't accept that people will die no matter what, and a curse like Mahito, who has his own moral code and purpose, cannot be treated like a regular enemy. The battle of Yuji Mahito's ideals pulled Nobara into the violence. She ended up fighting a doppelganger of Mahito, who she overcame in battle by hitting him with her resonance, damaging the real Mahito as well, making the copy run away. This only gave ideas to Mahito to use Nobara as a tool to continue to kill Yuji's soul by killing her and bringing her dead body to Yuji. Since she was stronger than he had expected, he decided to lead her into a trap to instead kill her in front of Yuji by using his original body. This plan was somewhat successful, with Nobara getting caught off guard completely by Mahito's idol transfiguration. Nobara's final words to Yuji are, "Tell everyone it wasn't so bad," implying that she was going to die with Mahito's attack. Seeing Nobara's eye get blown off was the last straw for Yuji's breaking point, giving Mahito the chance to attack whilst making Yuji lose the will to fight, unleashing a devastating black flash whilst opening Mahito up to new possibilities. Sukuna's rampage, Nanami's death, and Nobara's incapacitation worked in unison to destroy Yuji's soul and resolve, whilst empowering Mahito to feel more in tune with his own. Yuji became so depressed seeing Nobara being taken down, it gave Mahito the chance to pulverize him with a black flash and continue to give him a beating whilst lecturing him about his inability to realize the true meaning behind their fight. But Yuji is saved by his sworn big brother Todo right before Mahito deals the final blow. And like the perfect big brother that he is, he says the words needed to remind Yuji of his burdens as a sorcerer as well as Sukuna's vessel. Looking for meaning or logic in death can at times defile the memories of those we've lost. These words are a big part of what helps Yuji see the path to continue fighting, deciding to take on his sins firsthand instead of running away from them by giving in to Mahito's games. This realization puts Yuji on a new path of redemption for his choices of swallowing Sukuna's finger, whilst learning to process his guilt and prove that he's a proper Jujutsu sorcerer. Clearly, words have a profound impact on Yuji's life and journey. Mahito and Yuji's final fight embodied their moral clashes. At the end of it, Mahito and Yuji have their final moral moment, with Yuji admitting that Mahito was right. Looking for meaning in each other's actions is unnecessary and that he wanted to reject Mahito's thoughts, but now he believes he is a cog in the machine to exercise curses. This is actually a really depressing mentality for our boy to have to go through, because he's completely eliminating the value of his own opinions and feelings. He has decided to treat himself as just a piece of a bigger machine, when really Yuji is at the core of everything in the story, obviously because he is the main character after all. Mahito and Yuji's dynamic was the catalyst for Yuji to grow mentally, as well to help Mahito grow as a cursor that Kenjaku could capture him and take his ability. This is where Yuji's reality takes an even deeper, darker turn, revealing that Kenjaku, disguised as Geto, was planning everything from the beginning, including Yuji's birth itself. You see, Kenjaku planned the Goodwill Exchange attack, letting Mahito break into the school to take a few Sukuna fingers and the 3 death painting wombs, Choso, Eso, and Kechizu. Due to this, Yuji and Nobara end up fighting Eso and Kechizu, thinking they are curses, and end up killing them. This causes Choso, the eldest brother, to seek revenge. Remember, the death painting were creations of Noritoshi Kamo's DNA, aka Kenjaku, when he took Noritoshi's body, combined with a cursed spirit and an unknown woman. After being killed and revived by Yuta in chapter 143, we see a massive revelation through Yuji. In his unconscious state, Yuji has a dream that shows him as a baby being held by his father Jin, with Grandpa Itadori trying to warn Jin about the woman he is with. And what do you know? Ta-da! In the background of this conversation is none other than a woman with the stitches just like on Kamo and Geto's foreheads, and calls Grandpa Itadori her father-in-law. And so the villain that we have despised all along is actually the parent of Yuji. This confirms that Yuji's birth was by Kenjaku in a woman's body, so in a very odd way, Choso and his brothers are Yuji's family, meaning Yuji killed his own brothers unknowingly. As a result of this planned birth, it explains why Yuji was so naturally powerful from the very beginning, and also explains why he can control Sukuna's powers so well and retain his soul, because, well, in actuality, he was created for that very purpose by Kenjaku, so he's not really entirely human. Kenjaku even calls Yuji his son in the Culling Games arc while meeting with Sasaki, Yuji's old friend from the occult club we met at the very beginning of the story. He straight up thanks Sasaki for being a friend to Yuji during his time in a regular school. Remember, it's because of the occult club that Yuji picked up Sukuna's finger in the first place. Kenjaku is so twisted to the point that he went out of his way to thank Sasaki simply for creating a chance for Yuji to walk on the path that he created for him. If Sasaki had never decided to convince Yuji to join the club, it definitely would have been a lot harder for Kenjaku to get Yuji to pick up the finger willingly. Overall, this is a really twisted concept, especially because Choso's cursed techniques allow him to feel a deep connection to his brothers. The moment he defeated Yuji and almost killed him, Choso felt his technique activate, showing a memory in which Yuji and Choso are indeed family along with Kechizu and Eso. This means that he almost killed another one of his younger brothers. After the events of Shibuya, Choso takes on the big brother role, with Yuji set to be executed due to Sukuna's mass murders. And during this this time on the run, Yuji wanted to stay away from everyone, especially Megumi, knowing that for some reason Sukuna wants him. He also believed that the deaths of everyone in Shibuya was his fault, even though he was unconscious when Sukuna took control, something he believes even now. Yuji is really trying to take that burden on himself. It takes the words of both Yuta and Megumi for Yuji to begin to fight with them again, but inside he is doing what he feels is right to redeem his sins, with Megumi telling Yuji it is both their fault for the events of Shibuya, implying that him taking responsibility for wanting to keep Yuji alive. Even though Yuji decides to fight, he feels guilty for staying by Megumi's side, believing that Megumi will always suffer if he stays around. With Megumi revealing to Yuji that Kenjaku, who started the Culling Games, he asked for his assistance to help save Tsumaki. This request from Megumi sparks his drive to be a Jujutsu sorcerer with everyone once again. Yuji is not alone in his struggles. No matter how much he feels responsible for the things Sukuna does or for the death of Nanami, it is the people around Yuji that make his reality less depressing. The Culling Games is the beginning of a major shift in the world, apparently being used to bring out the new golden age of cursed techniques. With Sukuna at the center of that, Yuji's life is beginning to get even more complicated. Yuji and Megumi had to recruit the suspended upperclassman Hakari to help their side win the game. The thing about Hakari though is that he doesn't like the Jujutsu school at all, or so it seems, so the chances of him trusting them were very slim, especially since Hakari runs an illegal fight club for Jujutsu sorcerers and non-sorcerers. But with unexpected help from Panda, the two were able to get Hakari and the other upperclassman Kidara to join their cause, but not without Yuji demonstrating to Hakari his fever as a Jujutsu sorcerer. Hakari challenges Yuji and asks him why he came to him. Yuji simply answers, "My senpai said you were strong," and thus gets clobbered by Hakari. Hakari's issue with Yuji's answer goes back to Yaga challenging Yuji before becoming a sorcerer, not accepting the answer that he will fight because his grandpa said he should. This hits harder now that Principal Yaga is dead. Rest in peace, my man. Jujutsu Kaisen has changed a lot since the beginning, and that's reflected in Yuji, who continues with the idea that he is a cog in a machine to kill curses. He's holding on to the idea that he's outside the core of all of the events unfolding. Even with Hakari's pummeling, Yuji stands tall, demanding to know what Hakari believes his role in everything is. Yuji's passion burnt very strongly in his eyes, and Hakari noticed that. It was convincing enough for him to decide to help them with their cause. Entering the Culling Games, Gojo students plan to get players with 100 points to add rules that can either end the game or allow players to leave. They have no idea how until Akogane, the liaison between player and the Culling Game, appears, telling them a new rule has been added. This is confusing for the cast because none of them have entered the game yet, or so they think. Kogane reveals it is assigned to Yuji, who comes to the conclusion that it must be Sukuna. Megumi disagrees because he believes that Yuji ate the Sukuna finger out of his own choice. The thing is, Yuji just thinks he ate it completely out of his own free will, but really, he was being coerced and set up by Kenjaku to become Sukuna's vessel regardless. Everything he did was perfectly plotted step by step, going exactly as he planned. The plan must go on, however, and the group finds out the new rule is to see players' points and colony locations, and so they see that there are 2 players with 100 points. Yuji and Megumi's target was Higuruma, a modern day sorcerer and lawyer who just gained their powers when the game began. Yuji and Megumi became separated the moment they entered the colony due to unknown rules, so Yuji ends up facing Higuruma alone, bringing him face to face again with the sins of the past. You see, Higuruma's ability revolves around opening a domain expansion and putting the enemy on trial. He summons a Shikigami that holds scales to represent the life of law and justice which he followed as a lawyer. In this domain, Yuji is put on trial for going to a casino as a minor, denying he ever went. It is proven he did though through Higuruma's curse technique, the penalty being removal of cursed energy. Yuji is forced to fight using just his natural ability as Sukuna's vessel, surprising Higuruma, who literally compares him to an indestructible doll, which isn't exactly wrong when you think about it, since that's kind of what he was created to be by Kenjaku do at the end of the day. However, Yuji realizes that he can re-enter the domain if he requests a retrial, but the second offense is much worse than the first. Higurumi's Judge Shikigami put Yuji on trial for the massacre on October 31st in Shibuya. Instantly, he pleads guilty, saying, "Yeah, I did that. I'm not lying and I won't deny it." The death penalty was given, but Higuruma himself was shocked by the genuine sympathy in Yuji's guilty plea. That's because Yuji has genuinely accepted that he must pay for the crimes that Sukuna has committed in his body. Higuruma is given the executioner's blade in order to one-hit kill Yuji, but in their exchange, Higuruma lets go of the blade, believing that Yuji doesn't deserve death. The truth is, Higuruma is shown the evidence for the person's trial within his head, so he knows that Sukuna was the true killer. He asks Yuji why he pleaded guilty, and his answer is that everything is still his fault because he is weak. Yuji feels that he needs to be stronger if he's going to continue on, but the fact that he decided to fight against Higuruma instead of letting him use the blade proves, even through his depressing times, he has the will to fight, even if he believes he is just a cog in a machine. This reminds Higuruma of why he became a lawyer, all in order to help those who felt weak to the system, people just like Yuji who were doomed before they even begin. He decides to use his 100 points to make the rule that allows players to trade points, then departs, claiming that if he stayed with him, he'd hate himself more for the things that he has done. Yuji's reality is the epitome of despair, inconsequence, and the sheer truth of what it means to be intertwined with the world of Jujutsu. The evil horrors that face his path attack him physically and mentally. The essence of cursed energy is still not completely known to him, but inside him is the king of curses, the most dangerous enemy of the human race. Whilst Yuji believes his purpose is to simply die with Sukuna and be a cog that kills curses, Kenjaku sees him as a piece to a bigger puzzle that could redefine what Jujutsu sorcery is to our cast. In conclusion, this is why Gege has stated Yuji Itadori will either die by the end of the series or everyone else will, because everything has been set up in a manner to represent that of equivalent exchange. Now, Yuji's cool, right? But do you know who else is cool?
I don't know.
Satoru freaking Gojo! So, you should go and binge watch this video on your screen right now where we explain just how strong this sexy ass dude really is. Trust me, you're gonna love it. See you there.